Farmers find hidden cabin in the woods. What they see there transforms their lives. Thomas Miller held his wife's hand tightly as they watched the thin column of smoke rising among the trees. That part of the property had been purchased 3 years ago, but they had never explored it thoroughly. It was a dense area full of slopes and thick vegetation that made access difficult. The smoke was constant. It didn't seem like a wildfire, but rather something controlled, as if someone was cooking. Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. Intruders on his land, squatters trying to occupy that remote piece. "Let's go back and call someone," suggested Jennifer, his wife, squeezing his fingers more intensely. "No, we need to see what this is now," replied Thomas, although his voice trembled slightly. They had left early that morning to check the fences on the northern border. The Pine Ridge Farm was located on the outskirts of a small town in rural Virginia, surrounded by hills and dense woods. Thomas had inherited part of the land from his father, and with hard work alongside Jennifer, managed to expand it gradually. That wooded area had been a risky investment, but necessary to ensure water and pasture for the cattle during the dry months. Now, as they approached, the sound of crackling firewood became clearer. Thomas pushed aside low branches, making way for Jennifer. His heart was pounding. Who could be there? And for how long? That's when they saw the structure. It wasn't an improvised tent or a temporary camp. It was a real cabin, made with rustic wood and covered with clay tiles. Small but solid, smoke came from a crude chimney. Around it there was a small vegetable garden with greens, some chickens pecking, and clothes hanging on an improvised clothesline between 2 trees. Someone lived there, and it wasn't recent. Thomas stopped, holding Jennifer by the arm. She had also frozen, her eyes wide. Before they could decide what to do, the cabin door opened with a creak. An elderly woman appeared. She was thin, with completely white hair tied in a loose bun. She wore a simple, faded dress patched in several places. Her feet were bare, calloused. Her face was marked by deep wrinkles, but her eyes were lively, alert. She looked at them, first at Jennifer, then at Thomas, and then something changed in her expression. The surprise gave way to something that seemed like recognition, even joy. "Thomas?" Her voice came out trembling, almost a whisper. He felt his blood run cold. How did this woman know his name? "My son. Is it you?" The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. He staggered back, tripping over a root. Jennifer held him, but she was equally shocked, looking from the woman to her husband. "What? Who are you?" Thomas managed to ask, although he already knew. Deep down, he already knew. The woman took a step forward, her trembling hands extended as if she wanted to touch him, but didn't dare come closer. "It's me, son. I'm your mother, Margaret." Thomas felt his legs weaken. Jennifer supported him more firmly, but she herself seemed about to faint. That couldn't be true, it couldn't. My mother has been gone for 20 years, said Thomas, his voice coming out hoarse, desperate. Margaret shook her head slowly, tears beginning to stream down her wrinkled face. "I know what they told you. I know what everyone thinks, but I'm here, Thomas. I've always been here." Jennifer finally found her voice. "This is impossible. Thomas, let's go. This woman is confused, or it's some kind of scam." "It's not a scam," Margaret interrupted, now looking at Jennifer with a pleading expression. "I know it's hard to believe. I know it caused pain. But you need to hear me out, please." Thomas let go of Jennifer's support and took a step forward. He studied the woman's face, the features, the eyes, and then he saw. He saw his mother. Older, worn down, unrecognizable at first glance. But it was her. How? He couldn't go on. The words got lost in his tight throat. "Please come in," Margaret asked, gesturing toward the cabin. "I know you must be confused, scared, angry, but I need to explain. After all this time, I at least deserve that." Jennifer looked at Thomas, seeking guidance. He was pale, breathing with difficulty. He seemed about to have an attack, but he nodded. They entered the cabin. It was simple, almost primitive. A narrow bed in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs, a makeshift wood stove made of bricks and iron. Rough shelves held few utensils, cans, glass jars with grains. Everything very clean, organized. The wooden walls had some shelves with old books and a single framed photo. Thomas saw the photo and felt another blow. It was of him. A photo of himself as a child, playing in the backyard of the old house. He couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old there. "Please, sit down," Margaret offered the chairs. She herself remained standing, leaning against the wall, as if she didn't feel worthy of sitting in front of them. Jennifer pulled a chair but stayed tense, ready to run if necessary. Thomas sat down mechanically, his eyes fixed on his mother. "Why?" was all he could say. Margaret took a deep breath. Her hands trembled as she clasped them in front of her body. "Because I had no choice. Because staying would destroy you. Destroy our family in a way that would be impossible to fix." "You destroyed us when you disappeared," Thomas exploded, standing up abruptly. The chair fell back with a crash. "You vanished, without warning, without explanation. Dad fell into depression. I spent years thinking I had done something wrong, that I had driven you away." "I know," Margaret sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I know I caused pain. But it wasn't because of you. It was never because of you." Jennifer stood up too, placing herself between Thomas and Margaret in a protective gesture. "Then for whom was it? Why does a mother abandon her son and husband and disappear for 20 years? Margaret lowered her hands. Her face was wet, but there was a firmness in her eyes now. "Because of your father, Thomas. Because of what he did. And what I found out." Thomas shook his head. "My father was a good man. He worked his whole life on that farm, raised the family with dignity." "Your father had another woman," Margaret cut in, her voice firm now. "My best friend, Sarah. They had been meeting for years. I found out by chance. Saw them together in the back shed when I came back early from a trip to town." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Thomas felt his head spinning. Sarah. He remembered her. A cheerful woman who visited the house often. After his mother disappeared, Sarah also drifted away. He always thought it was strange, but he had so many other things on his mind back then. "No," Thomas whispered. "No. You're making this up." "I wish I were," Margaret replied, her voice breaking. "But I'm not. I confronted them that day. Your father begged for forgiveness, said he would end it all. Sarah looked at me with contempt and said I was to blame, that I didn't take care of him properly. That night I went home pretending everything was normal, but something broke inside me." Jennifer pulled Thomas back into the chair. He sat down, dazed, trying to process it. Even so, even if it were true, why disappear? Why not just separate? Margaret picked up a low stool and finally sat down, looking exhausted. "Because it wasn't just that, son. There was more, much more. And when I found out the rest, I knew that staying would put you in danger." "What rest?" Jennifer asked, her voice tense. Margaret stood up again and went to the bed. She pulled a wooden box from under it. She came back and placed it on the table. When he opened it, Thomas saw bundles of letters, some yellowed with time. Margaret picked up a handful and held them out to him. "I wrote to you every week for the first 5 years, then it became once a month. I never sent them. I couldn't. But it's all here. Everything I wanted to tell you." Thomas took the letters with trembling hands. He looked at the envelopes, all addressed to him, all without stamps, never mailed. He opened one at random. The date was 20 years ago, 2 months after the disappearance. "My dear Thomas, today you would have turned 15. I imagine how you must be. If you've grown, if you've changed, if you still think of me, or if you've learned to hate me, I wouldn't blame you for the hatred. I hate myself too. But know that there isn't a day when I don't think of you. There isn't a morning when I don't wake up hoping I could return, but I can't. Not yet. Maybe never. What I did out of love. I hope one day you understand. Your mother who never forgot you." Thomas couldn't read anymore. He folded the letter with shaking fingers and looked at his mother. "You talk about love, but you left me. You talk about danger, but you don't explain what. These aren't answers. They're excuses." Margaret nodded as if she expected that reaction. "You're right. I deserve your anger. But the full truth is worse than you imagine. And before I tell it, you need to be prepared to accept that the man you believed was your father might not have been who you thought. Jennifer held Thomas's hand across the table. We came all this way. Just tell us everything, she said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. Margaret looked back at the box, took a deep breath, and began to reveal secrets that had been buried for 2 decades. Your father, Robert Miller, wasn't just a farmer. He had side businesses. He brokered land, cattle, and equipment sales. Nothing illegal at first. But then he started taking advance money from people in town to invest in collective purchases, promised high returns, guaranteed profit. Thomas listened with growing attention. He had never heard of this. The problem was he started using money from some to pay others. When the deals didn't work out, he took on more investors to cover the previous ones. It became a snowball. When I found out, there were already more than 15 families involved, people from our community, friends, neighbors. He was running a scam. Thomas could barely say the words. It didn't start that way. I think he really believed it would work at first. But he lost control, and when I realized the severity, he owed a lot, much more than we had. The farm, the house, everything was at risk, and worse, some people had started making threats. Jennifer squeezed Thomas's hand tighter. What kind of threats? They said they would destroy our family. They would expose everything. They wanted revenge, not just against Robert, but against all of us. I was afraid for Thomas. He was a teenager, vulnerable. If that exploded, he would be marked forever. But you disappeared, Thomas said, his voice full of hurt. If you wanted to protect me, why did you leave me with him? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment. Because I made a deal. I took the blame. Said it was me who took people's money, that I made bad investments without Robert knowing. Said I was running from the shame and the consequences. Your father kept his reputation. You stayed protected. And I came here. That doesn't make sense. Jennifer shook her head. Why would people believe that? Why didn't they come after you? Because I left evidence, fake documents that I prepared with Sarah's help, ironically. She knew everything and, for some twisted reason of guilt, helped me fabricate the story. People were angry with me, but Robert stayed on his feet. The farm endured. And you, Thomas, can grow up without carrying the burden of being the son of a fraud. Thomas stood up again, this time walking to the small window of the cabin. He looked out at the dense forest, trying to sort out his thoughts. Therapy, he said suddenly. I went to therapy for years after you disappeared. I took medication for anxiety, for depression. I had panic attacks thinking I'd done something wrong, that I'd driven you away from home without realizing it. I know. Margaret's voice was heavy with regret. I watched from afar whenever I could. I came to town a few times, in disguise, just to catch a glimpse of you. I saw you finish high school. I saw you start dating Jennifer. Jennifer's eyes widened. You were watching us. Rarely. And from a distance. I never approached, but I needed to know if he was okay. It was the only thing that kept me sane here. Thomas turned abruptly. And my father? Did he know where you were? Margaret nodded slowly. In the first few years, yes. He'd come here occasionally. He'd bring supplies, news about you. But it was painful for both of us. Eventually, the visits stopped. He rebuilt his life, I imagine. And I learned to live alone here. He suffered a lot after you disappeared, Thomas said, his voice hard. Even if it was all a lie, even if he wasn't the man I thought he was, he suffered. He drank for years. The farm almost went bankrupt. I only managed to recover everything after he passed away, 5 years ago. Margaret covered her face again, her body shaking with silent sobs. I'm sorry for everything, for every bit of pain I caused, but I still believe I did the best I could in that situation. Jennifer stood up and walked around the cabin, observing the details. It was then that she noticed something odd on a high shelf, photographs, several of them, turned face down as if Margaret didn't want to see them, but couldn't bring herself to throw them away. "May I?" Jennifer asked, pointing to the photos. Margaret hesitated but eventually agreed. Jennifer reached for the photos and began turning them over one by one. Most were of Thomas at various ages. Some were of the old house, the farm. But then Jennifer stopped at a specific photo. It was Margaret. Younger, but clearly her. And she was pregnant, very pregnant. "This photo, when was it taken?" Jennifer asked, showing it to Thomas. He looked at it, and his expression changed to confusion. "Mother, you were pregnant when you disappeared?" The silence that followed was heavier than all the previous ones. Margaret looked at the photo in Jennifer's hands, and her legs seemed to weaken. She leaned against the wall. "Yes," she whispered. Thomas felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. I have a brother, a sister." Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely now. "A sister. She was born here. Premature. She almost didn't survive. I had no resources, no proper medical help. It was a miracle she lived." Jennifer let the photos drop onto the table. "Where is she? What happened to her? I couldn't take care of her alone here. She needed care I couldn't provide. So I gave her to my cousin, Susan, who lives in another city. I told her she was the daughter of an acquaintance who had passed away. Susan and her husband always wanted children and couldn't have any. They accepted without asking too many questions." Thomas needed to sit down again. Jennifer stood beside him, also processing the bombshell information. "Does she know? Does she know who she really is?" Thomas asked. "I don't know. I never had direct contact again. Susan promised to take good care of her, to give her a decent life. It was all I could do." "What's her name?" Jennifer asked. Margaret smiled for the first time, a sad smile heavy with longing. "Emily. I named her Emily before I gave her away. I hope they kept it." Thomas was trying to absorb it all. He had a sister he never knew existed. A sister who grew up without knowing her real mother, without knowing her brother. "We need to find her," he said suddenly, looking at Jennifer. "She deserves to know the truth." "Thomas, think about this." Jennifer tried to calm him. "It's been so many years. She has a life. She might not want to know all this. It doesn't matter. She has the right to decide. She has the right to know who she is." Margaret shook her head. "I don't know if it's a good idea. It could cause more pain." "More pain than has already been caused," Thomas shot back, anger rising again. "You destroyed our family with secrets and lies. Don't start thinking you can decide what's best now." The comment hit Margaret like a slap. She recoiled, her eyes welling up, but didn't fight back. She knew he was right. Jennifer held Thomas's arm. "Let's take it easy. We need to think about how to do this the right way." "But he's right, Margaret. If this girl exists, she deserves to know." Margaret finally agreed, defeated. "Susan lives in Charlottesville. The address should still be the same from 20 years ago. I can give it to you." "You're not coming?" Thomas asked, surprised. "I don't deserve to be at that meeting. I've caused enough suffering. If Emily wants to meet me later, let it be her decision. But I won't impose myself." Thomas didn't argue. He was still processing everything. He still didn't know if he forgave his mother or if he ever could. But now he had another priority, finding the sister he never knew he had. Margaret went to an old trunk in the corner of the cabin and took out a yellowed piece of paper. She wrote an address with a shaky hand and gave it to Thomas. "Before you go, I need to tell you one more thing," she said, her voice low. "About your father, about what really happened with the money." Thomas put the paper in his pocket and looked at his mother. "There's more. The documents I mentioned. The proof that I was the one who caused the problem. It's all here. But there's something I never told anyone. Not even your father." Margaret went back to the wooden box and took out a thick envelope, sealed with red wax. Inside is the real truth. The real documents showing exactly what Robert did, who he dealt with, how much he owes each person, and more. It shows he wasn't alone in this. "What do you mean?" Jennifer asked. "There were other men involved, important men from the region. They were in on the scheme too. When everything started to fall apart, it was convenient to put all the blame on me. Robert accepted it because it protected you, Thomas. But he was also protecting them. Thomas took the envelope, feeling its literal and figurative weight in his hands. "Why did you keep this for so long? In case I ever needed to prove my innocence? In case you came looking for me? In case things changed? I don't know. Maybe just because I couldn't throw away the only thing that proved I didn't go crazy, that I didn't make it all up." Jennifer looked at the envelope too. "Who are these men? Open it and see. But know that by opening this, you're opening a wound that many people would prefer to keep closed. Powerful families, people who built reputations on the ashes of what happened." Thomas hesitated. He looked at Jennifer, seeking guidance. She shrugged, leaving the decision to him. With trembling fingers, Thomas broke the wax seal. He opened the envelope and took out a stack of papers. He began to read, and the more he read, the more his expression changed to shock, then anger, then something close to nausea. "This can't be true," he whispered. Jennifer took some papers and read them too. Her eyes widened. "Thomas, your father-in-law. My father is here." Thomas looked at her, then back at the papers. It was true. David Thompson's name was there, along with at least a dozen other familiar names. Merchants, landowners, even the former mayor of the town. "Your father was one of the investors," Margaret confirmed. "One of the ones who lost money. One of the ones who demanded revenge." Jennifer felt her legs weaken. She sat down heavily in the chair. "My father always held a grudge against the Miller family. Always. But he never explained why. He just said they were no good people, that we shouldn't get involved." "That's why your relationship with her family was always tense," Thomas realized. "That's why David never liked me, never truly accepted our marriage. He knew," Jennifer said, more to herself than to the others. "He knew the story was false. He knew Margaret took the blame, and he still allowed it." Margaret confirmed with a sad nod. "Everyone knew. It was a silent agreement. I would disappear, take the blame, and all the important men in town could go on with their lives, their businesses, their reputations intact." Thomas crumpled the papers in his hands, anger growing. "And my father accepted this. Accepted you being slandered, disappearing, just to protect those men. To protect himself." "To protect you," Margaret corrected gently. In his mind, that's what he was doing, and perhaps he was. "And if the truth had come out back then, you would be the son of the cheater. You would be marked forever. So instead I became the son of the woman who abandoned her family," Thomas retorted bitter. "Much better." Margaret had no answer for that. She just lowered her head. Jennifer took the documents from Thomas's hands and arranged them on the table, reading more carefully. "There are receipts here, transfer slips, contracts. This is very well documented." "Your father was meticulous," Margaret explained. "He kept records of everything. He thought he was being clever, that if anything went wrong, he'd have a way to protect himself. Ironically, that's what allowed me to copy everything before I disappeared." Thomas walked to the cabin door and opened it, needing fresh air. He looked at the woods around him, trying to process 20 years of lies being undone in one morning. Jennifer joined him. "What are we going to do?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Thomas admitted. "But I can't just pretend I didn't see this. My father—" Jennifer began but couldn't continue. Thomas pulled her into a hug. "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." They stayed like that for a few moments, until Margaret approached timidly. "Should I stay here?" she asked, her voice small. "Or do you want me to leave?" Thomas separated from Jennifer and looked at his mother. He saw an elderly lady, fragile, who had sacrificed everything for a cause that might not even have been just. He felt anger, resentment, hurt. But he also saw courage. He saw love, even if twisted and misguided. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said honestly. "Not now. Maybe never. But I won't let you die alone in these woods like a fugitive. That's not right." Margaret covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes overflowing with tears. "You don't have to." "Yes, we do," Jennifer interrupted, surprising everyone, including herself. "No more secrets, no more lies. If we're going to rebuild anything, it has to be with the truth, all of it. Thomas looked at his wife with gratitude. She had always been his anchor, his strength. "Here's what we'll do," he said, turning to Margaret. "You come with us. You'll stay at the farm for now. We need time to process all this, but first we're going after Emily. Wherever she is, we'll find her." Margaret wanted to protest, but the firmness in her son's gaze made her quiet. She just nodded, submissive. "I need to gather a few things," she said, going back inside the cabin. While Margaret gathered her few belongings in an old bag, Thomas and Jennifer talked outside. "Are you ready for this?" Jennifer asked. "For everything that might come after?" "No," Thomas admitted, "but I can't ignore it. My whole life was built on lies. I need to know the truth, all of it. What about the other men, the documents?" "I don't know yet. But this can't stay hidden forever. These people owe answers. To my mother, to the families who were deceived, to everyone." Jennifer agreed, but there was worry in her eyes. "Your father-in-law, my father will be dragged into all this. I know, and I'm sorry. But he made his choices. Now he has to face them." Margaret came out of the cabin carrying only a small bag and the wooden box with the letters and documents. She looked back one last time at the place that had been her home for 2 decades. "Ready?" Thomas asked. "No," she answered honestly. "But let's go anyway." The walk back through the woods was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. When they finally reached where the pickup was parked, Margaret stopped and looked at the vehicle as if it were an alien spacecraft. "It's been a long time since I've ridden in one of these," she commented, almost to herself. Thomas opened the door for her. Margaret got in with difficulty, no longer used to it. Jennifer got in the front, next to Thomas. The engine started, and they began the journey back to the Pine Ridge farm. Along the way, Thomas watched his mother in the rearview mirror. Margaret looked out the window with wide eyes, seeing the world she had left behind so long ago. The paved road, other farms, new fences, even the landscape had changed. "How did you manage to survive alone all this time?" Jennifer asked, breaking the silence. Margaret turned her attention forward. "I learned. In the first few months, Robert brought supplies. After he stopped coming, I started planting. I raised chickens, had a goat for milk. I made crafts and traded with a traveling vendor who passed by occasionally. He didn't ask many questions, just wanted to do business." "Weren't you ever sick? Didn't you get hurt?" I got hurt, but I learned to deal with it. Medicinal herbs, home remedies. Once I broke my wrist and had to let it heal on its own. It ended up crooked." She showed her left wrist, which had a slight deformity. "But it worked." Thomas gripped the steering wheel tighter. The image of his mother alone, hurt, going through all that, while he grew up not knowing she was alive, was unbearable. They arrived at the farm as the sun began to set. It was a beautiful, well-kept property. Renovated main house, new barns, fences in order, very different from the farm Margaret had known. "Did you do all this?" she asked when they got out. "With Jennifer," Thomas corrected. "Both of us. After Dad passed away, I inherited a place that was almost in ruins. It took years to restore." Margaret looked around with pride mixed with sadness. Pride in her son, sadness for not having been part of any of it. "It's beautiful." A woman appeared on the porch of the house. She was young, maybe around 30, with brown hair tied in a ponytail. She wore work clothes and dirty rubber boots. "Thomas, Jennifer, didn't expect you back so soon. Did you manage to check the fences?" Thomas and Jennifer exchanged glances. They hadn't thought about how to explain Margaret. "Emily, we need to talk," Thomas began. That's when everything clicked. The name, the approximate age, the person on their property he saw almost every day. Thomas turned slowly to Margaret, who had frozen upon hearing the name. "The veterinarian," he said, his voice trembling. "Emily Wilson, our veterinarian. Is it her?" Margaret was pale, looking at the young woman on the porch as if seeing a ghost. She nodded slowly. "It's her. I recognized her as soon as I saw her." Jennifer covered her mouth with her hand. "She's worked here for 2 years, since she came back from college. Are you saying that—" "She's my sister," Thomas finished, feeling the world spin again. Emily came down the steps, confused by the tension in the air. "Is everything okay? Who is this lady?" Thomas didn't know what to say, how to begin, how to explain. But before he could speak, Emily stopped abruptly. Her eyes went from Margaret to Thomas, then to Jennifer, and back to Margaret. "Wait, I know you," Emily said slowly, pointing at Margaret. I saw you in an old photo, at my Aunt Susan's house." Margaret began to tremble. Tears streamed down her face. "Emily!" The young woman took a step back, confusion turning to shock. "You are... No, that doesn't make sense." "Emily, please listen to me." Margaret approached, hands outstretched. "No!" Emily screamed, backing away further. "Aunt Susan said my mother had passed away, said she was someone she knew but couldn't give me details. You're alive?" Thomas moved closer to Emily. "We need to talk. All of us. There's a lot to explain." Emily looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "Why do you look so shaken? What's going on?" "Because she's not just your birth mother," Thomas said gently. "She's also my mother. You're my sister." The silence that followed was absolute. Emily staggered, having to lean on the nearest fence post. Her legs gave way, and she sat on the ground, breathing in short gasps. Jennifer ran to help her, holding her shoulders. "Breathe. Slowly. Breathe." "This can't be happening," Emily repeated between difficult breaths. "This isn't real." "It is real," Margaret said, keeping her distance to not scare the young woman further. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Emily looked up, her eyes now filled with tears and anger. How can this be? I've worked here for 2 years. I saw you every day, Thomas. Why did you never say anything?" "Because I didn't know," Thomas protested, also kneeling beside her. "I just found out. Today, a few hours ago. I thought my mother had left 20 years ago. I had no idea she was alive, hidden in the woods on my own property." Emily looked from Thomas to Margaret, trying to process it. "Does Aunt Susan know about this?" "She knew Margaret was the birth mother," Jennifer explained, "but I don't know if she knew the whole story. About Thomas. About everything that happened." "Susan accepted you without questions," Margaret said softly. "Said she would raise you as her own daughter. And she did. She loved you as if you were hers. I know because I watched from afar when I could." "You watched us?" Emily asked, her voice rising. "You lived in hiding but watched us? What kind of mother does that?" "One who made terrible mistakes," Margaret admitted. "One who doesn't deserve forgiveness but never stopped loving her children." Emily stood up abruptly, moving away from everyone. No, I can't do this right now. It's too much." She started walking away toward her pickup truck parked near the shed. "Emily, wait!" Thomas ran after her. She stopped but didn't turn around. "I need time. I need to think. It's too much to process. I understand, but don't run away. Please, we've already lost 20 years. I don't want to lose more." Emily finally turned around. Her face was red, wet with tears. "You didn't lose anything. You had a mother who disappeared, but you had a father. You had a family. I grew up thinking no one wanted me, that my mother had died and left me with relatives out of obligation. Do you think years of therapy fix that? Do you think I can just accept that everything was okay, that it was for some greater reason?" Thomas had no answer. She was right. "I'm going home," Emily said finally. "Tomorrow, if you still want to talk, I'll come back. But today I can't." She got into the pickup truck and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust on the road. Thomas stood still, watching until she disappeared. Margaret was sobbing behind him, leaning on Jennifer. "I ruined everything," she cried. "I ruined my children." "No," Jennifer said firmly. "You did what you thought was right. It might have been wrong, but it was what you thought was right. Now we need to deal with the consequences together." Thomas returned, his shoulders slumped. "Let's go inside. We still have a lot to talk about." They entered the house. Margaret looked around, marveling at the simple yet cozy decor. Photos on the walls showed Thomas and Jennifer over the years, their wedding, trips, happy moments, a whole life she hadn't been part of. "Have a seat," Jennifer indicated the sofa. "I'll make coffee." While Jennifer busied herself in the kitchen, Thomas sat in an armchair facing his mother. "You knew," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. "You knew Emily was here." Margaret nodded, ashamed. "I found out when she started working at the farm. I overheard conversations when I came near the border occasionally. I saw her once, from a distance. I recognized her immediately." "And you said nothing?" "Let me interact with my own sister without knowing." What would I have said? How could I just appear out of nowhere claiming to be the woman who abandoned everything? Emily seemed happy. You seemed happy. I didn't want to ruin that. "But you ruined it today," Thomas pointed out. "When you saw us in the woods, you revealed everything." "Because I had no choice. You saw me, you found me. I couldn't keep lying anymore." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jennifer returned with coffee. She served everyone and sat next to Thomas. "We need to go after her," Jennifer said. "Tomorrow. Explain everything calmly. Show the documents if necessary." "I agree," Thomas said, "but we also need to decide what to do with this information, about the men who were involved, about the truth." Margaret looked at the wooden box she had brought, now on the coffee table. "The choice is yours. It always has been. I kept this so that one day you could decide." Thomas picked up the envelope with the documents again, looked at the names, his father-in-law, the owner of the town's main grocery store, the former mayor, the local bank owner, even the principal of the school he had attended. "These people built everything on this lie," he said thoughtfully. "Their families too. Children, grandchildren. If we expose this now, it's not just them who suffer." "But the families who were deceived also suffered," Jennifer reminded him. "Some lost everything, others never recovered financially. And my mother was crucified for something she didn't do. She lived 20 years as a fugitive in the woods because of a deal that wasn't fair." Margaret interrupted. "Don't do anything for me. I accepted that deal. I made my choice. If you're going to expose the truth, let it be for what's right, not for revenge." Thomas rubbed his face, tired. "I don't know what's right. Honestly, I have no idea." "Then don't decide now," Jennifer suggested. "Let everything settle. Talk to Emily first. Then we'll think about the rest." Thomas agreed. It was sensible. He tried to stand up, but felt a wave of dizziness. The day had been too long, too intense. "You should rest," Jennifer said, noticing. "We all should." "Where will I sleep?" Margaret asked, uncertain. "We have a guest room," Jennifer replied. "You can stay there for now." She led Margaret to the room. It was simple but comfortable. Double bed, wardrobe, a window overlooking the orchard. "The bathroom is right there," Jennifer indicated. "If you need anything during the night, you can call." "Jennifer," Margaret called out as she was leaving, "thank you for being so kind to me. I don't deserve it." Jennifer stopped, considering her words. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Thomas. He deserves answers. He deserves to try to understand what happened. But don't confuse kindness with forgiveness. I still don't know if I can forgive what you did." Margaret nodded, understanding. "It's more than I have a right to expect." Jennifer left, closing the door. She found Thomas in the kitchen, looking out the window into the darkness outside. "Are you going to stand there all night?" she asked affectionately. "Trying to organize my thoughts," he admitted. "This morning I woke up thinking it would be a normal day. Check fences, maybe vaccinate some calves. And now I find out my mother is alive, that I have a sister, that my whole life was based on lies." Jennifer hugged him from behind. "I know. It's a lot. But we'll handle this together, okay?" He turned and hugged her back, holding her tight. "I don't know what I'd do without you. Good news is you won't have to find out." They stayed like that for long minutes, just holding each other, seeking comfort in one another. Eventually, they went to the bedroom. Thomas lay down but couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything. Thinking about the father who wasn't who he thought, about the mother who sacrificed everything for a reason he still wasn't sure was worth it, about the sister who'd been by his side for 2 years without him knowing. How to proceed? How to fix something that had been broken for so long? He had no answers, only more questions. The next morning, Thomas woke before sunrise. Jennifer was still sleeping. He dressed silently and went to the kitchen. To his surprise, he found Margaret already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. "Couldn't sleep," she explained. "Bed's too soft after 20 years on a straw mattress." Thomas poured himself coffee and sat across from her. "I need to know more things," he said directly, "about Dad, about who he really was." Margaret sighed, preparing herself. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. You said he was having an affair with Sarah. For how long?" "Years. Maybe 5-6 years before I found out. I started suspecting when he began traveling more to the city, always with business excuses. Once I found a note in his pocket. He said it fell from a client, but I knew. You develop an instinct for these things. Why didn't you confront him sooner? Fear, shame. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. When I finally saw with my own eyes, I couldn't deny it anymore. And the money? When did he start with that?" "Around the same time. I think the two were connected. He needed money to impress Sarah, to keep the affair hidden. Started small, legitimate investments, but the greed grew, or maybe the desperation." Thomas processed this. "Did he ever love you? Really?" Margaret took time to answer. "I believe so. In the beginning. When we married, he seemed happy. You were born, and he was a devoted father. But people change, or maybe they just show who they really are over time." "Did you love him?" "I did, even after everything." "Even after. That was perhaps my biggest mistake. I loved him even when I shouldn't have anymore." Thomas took a sip of coffee, trying to digest these revelations. "And Sarah? What happened to her after?" "I don't know. She disappeared from town too, shortly after me. Maybe she and Robert continued the relationship. Maybe she felt guilty and left. I never knew." Jennifer appeared in the kitchen, still in pajamas. "You started without me?" "Sorry," Thomas said. "Couldn't sleep." Jennifer made her coffee and joined them. "So, what's the plan for today?" "Going after Emily," Thomas answered. "She said she'd come back, but I'm not taking chances. I'm going to her house." "We're going," Jennifer corrected. "You're not doing this alone." "And me?" Margaret asked. "Should I come too?" Thomas thought. "No, I think it would be too much for her. Let us talk first, see how she is. If she wants to see you later, we'll bring her." Margaret agreed, though there was clear disappointment in her eyes. After breakfast, Thomas and Jennifer got ready and headed to town. Emily lived in a small rented house on the outskirts. When they arrived, her pickup truck was out front, but it seemed not to have moved since the previous night. Thomas knocked on the door. Nothing. He knocked again. "Emily? It's me, Thomas." "May I come in? I heard movement inside." The door opened slowly. Emily was in wrinkled clothes, her eyes swollen from crying. Clearly she hadn't slept. "You came?" she said, her voice hoarse. "We said we would talk. I wasn't going to leave it like this." Emily opened the door completely, letting them in. The house was simple but tidy. A bookshelf with veterinary books, some plants, framed photos of Emily with Susan and her husband. "Would you like coffee?" she offered mechanically. "Don't worry about that," Jennifer said gently. "We just want to talk." They sat in the small living room. Emily stayed in an armchair, hugging a cushion as if it were a shield. "I didn't sleep," she admitted. "I spent the whole night trying to process it. I called Aunt Susan." Thomas leaned forward. "What did she say?" "That she knew. That she always knew Margaret was my biological mother, but she promised never to tell. She said Margaret showed up one day, pregnant and desperate, begging for help. Aunt Susan and Uncle Richard had wanted a child for years. They saw it as a gift, even though the circumstances were strange." "Did she know about Thomas? About me being your brother?" Thomas asked. Emily shook her head. "No. Margaret never told her she had another child. She only said she couldn't keep the baby, that it was a matter of life or death. Aunt Susan thought it was some abusive relationship, some dangerous situation she accepted without asking too much. "And you? How do you feel about all this?" Jennifer asked. Emily laughed humorlessly. "How do you think? My whole life was a lie. I grew up thinking my biological mother had died, that I was an orphan who was lucky to be adopted. Finding out she was alive, that she was watching me, that—" Her voice broke. "That she chose to abandon me is devastating." "It wasn't a simple choice," Thomas said. "She was protecting you, protecting both of us." "From what?" Emily shot back. "From shame? From scandal? There are worse things than growing up with your real mother. Growing up without her is one of them." Thomas didn't argue. She had a right to her anger. "I brought something that might help you understand, see," he said, taking some of the documents from the box Margaret had kept. "Our mother kept everything. Letters she wrote but never sent, documents about what really happened. She wasn't running away from you, she was running for you." Emily took the papers hesitantly. She began to read. As she read, her expression changed. Surprise, shock, eventually reluctant understanding. "Is all this true? Our father did all this?" "Apparently, yes, did." "And my mother?" "Our mother took the blame." Emily continued reading, focusing on the letters now. Tears started to fall again as she read the words Margaret had written to Thomas over the years. Messages of longing, of love, of remorse. "She suffered," Emily said softly. "Alone in those woods for 20 years, she suffered a lot." "We all suffered," Thomas said. "In different ways, but now we have the chance to change that. To be a family, even if messy and broken." Emily wiped her face with her hands. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can just accept and move on." "No one is asking you to move on," Jennifer said. "They're asking you not to give up, to give it a chance, for her, for Thomas, for yourself." Emily was silent for a long time, processing. "Is she at the farm now?" "She is," Thomas confirmed. "Does she want to see me?" "More than anything in the world, but she'll understand if you don't want to." Emily stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the quiet street in her neighborhood. "Aunt Susan told me something yesterday," she began. "She said that when Margaret handed me over, she cried so much that Aunt Susan thought she would faint. She said that Margaret made her promise 3 things: to love me as her daughter, to give me opportunities to study, and one day, if possible, to tell me that she never meant to abandon me." "Did she keep all 3 promises?" Jennifer asked. "The first 2, yes. She loved me as her own daughter, sent me to college even when there was no money to spare. But the third, she never did. Until yesterday." Emily turned to them. "I'll go with you. I want to hear it from her. I want to understand. I can't promise to forgive and I can't promise to accept everything right away. But I will listen." Thomas stood up, relieved. "That's more than enough. Thank you." They went back to the farm together. The ride was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, they found Margaret in the yard feeding the chickens. She stopped when she saw the truck. As Emily got out, Margaret dropped the bucket, spilling corn on the ground. "Emily!" The young woman stopped a few feet away. The 2 women looked at each other. Mother and daughter, separated by 20 years, by lies and secrets, yet connected by blood and pain. "Hello," Emily said simply. "Hello," Margaret replied, her voice trembling. "Thomas showed me the documents. I read your letters. They weren't for you, but I know. But they helped me understand. A little." Margaret took a hesitant step forward. Can I hug you?" Emily hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. Margaret approached and wrapped her arms around her daughter. Emily was stiff at first, but gradually relaxed. She didn't return the hug, but she didn't pull away either. "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered between sobs. "I'm so sorry, my girl, so sorry." When they separated, Emily wiped her face. "I don't know if we can just get past all of this, but I'm willing to try to get to know you, the real you." "That's more than I deserve," Margaret said. Thomas and Jennifer watched from a distance, giving mother and daughter space. He took his wife's hand. "Do you think we can make it? Be a family?" "I don't know," Jennifer admitted, "but I think you deserve to try." They spent the rest of the day talking. Margaret shared more details about her 20 years alone. Emily talked about her childhood with Susan and Richard, about college, about how she ended up returning to that area and coincidentally started working for Thomas. "It wasn't a coincidence," Emily admitted. "Aunt Susan told me my birth mother was from this region. When I saw the job opening for a veterinarian at Pine Ridge Farm, something pulled me. I took it without thinking too much. Now I understand that maybe, subconsciously, I was looking for answers." "And you found more than you expected," Thomas commented. "Much more." In the evening, Jennifer prepared a simple dinner. The four of them sat at the table, an odd dynamic that gradually seemed less forced. Conversations flowed more naturally. Some silences were still uncomfortable, but not unbearable. After dinner, Thomas brought the wooden box into the living room. "We need to decide what to do with this," he said, pointing to the documents. "With the truth about what happened." Margaret shook her head. "I already said, the decision is yours." "No," Emily interrupted. "It's ours, all four of us. This affects all of us." Jennifer agreed. "Emily is right. It can't just be Thomas's decision. We're all part of this now." Thomas looked at each of them and nodded. "Then let's vote. Who thinks we should expose the truth?" Jennifer raised her hand. "The families who were harmed deserve to know. Margaret deserves to have her name cleared." Emily hesitated, but also raised her hand. "I agree, secrets have done enough damage, time for the truth." Thomas raised his hand too. 3 in favor. "Mother?" Margaret looked at her empty hands. "I abstained, but if this is your will, I support it." "Then it's decided," Thomas said. "We'll expose everything, but carefully, in a way that causes the least possible collateral damage. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Thomas began to plan. He consulted a trusted lawyer in another town, someone who had no connections to the families involved. The lawyer reviewed the documents and confirmed they were legitimate and potentially explosive. "If you disclose this, it will cause an earthquake in your town," the lawyer warned. "Are you sure you want to move forward?" "I am," Thomas confirmed. Meanwhile, the relationship between Margaret and her children was slowly rebuilding. Emily started visiting the farm more often. The conversations were still careful, measured, but there was progress. One afternoon, Emily found Margaret working in a small garden she had started behind the house. "Can I help?" Emily offered. Margaret looked surprised but pleased. "Of course, I'm planting medicinal herbs. I learned a lot about them over the years." They worked side by side in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emily asked, "How did you manage? 20 years alone, without going crazy?" Margaret stopped digging and looked at the horizon. "Who said I didn't go crazy? There were days I thought I would. I talked to myself, cried until I had no tears left, screamed at the trees. But then I remembered why I was there. For you. For Thomas. And that kept me sane. Or sane enough." "Did you never think about coming back? About trying to resume your life?" "Every day. But I was afraid. Afraid the truth would come out and destroy you. Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid it was too late." Emily put her hand on her mother's shoulder. "Maybe it's too late for many things, but not for everything. We still have time." Margaret covered Emily's hand with hers, squeezing gently. "Thank you for giving me this chance." While mother and daughter worked in the garden, Thomas was in town preparing the next step. He had scheduled a meeting with the local newspaper, but not just any meeting. He wanted to do things the right way, without sensationalism, without unnecessarily destroying lives. The newspaper editor, a middle-aged man named Michael Stevens, received Thomas with curiosity. Farmers from the area rarely came to the newsroom with stories to tell. "Mr. Miller, how can I help you?" Michael asked, pointing to a chair in his cramped office. Thomas placed a folder on the table between them. "I have a story that will shake our town, but I need it to be told responsibly." Michael raised an eyebrow, interested. "I'm listening." Thomas took a deep breath and began to tell. He told about the mother who disappeared 20 years ago, about the fraudulent investments, about the powerful men who protected themselves at Margaret's expense, about the sister he never knew existed. He told everything. When he finished, Michael was pale, taking frantic notes. This is huge. If I publish this, half the town will sue me." "I have documents that prove everything." Thomas opened the folder, showing copies of the papers. "Contracts, receipts, written confessions, it's all here." Michael examined the documents with experienced journalist eyes. "This is legitimate. My God, this is really legitimate." "So will you publish?" Michael leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "I need to verify everything first. Talk to lawyers, but yes, if it's true, it's my duty to publish. The town deserves to know." Thomas nodded, satisfied. "I just ask one thing. My mother has suffered enough. But tell her story with compassion, not as if she were a criminal." "I'll do the best job possible," Michael promised. Thomas left the newsroom feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He had started the process. Now it was time to wait for the consequences. When he returned to the farm, he found a scene that warmed his heart. Margaret, Emily, and Jennifer were in the kitchen, preparing dinner together, laughing, talking, looking for the first time like a family. "How did it go?" Jennifer asked when she saw him. "In motion," Thomas replied. "The newspaper will publish the story next week." Emily stopped chopping vegetables. "So, it's really happening. There's no turning back now." "We can still stop if you've changed your minds," Thomas offered. But all three women shook their heads. "No," Margaret said firmly. "It's time for the truth, whatever it takes." The following week was tense. Thomas could barely concentrate on the farm work. Emily was nervous, making small mistakes she normally wouldn't make. Jennifer tried to keep everyone calm, but she was anxious too. Margaret alternated between hope and terror for what was to come. Finally, on Thursday morning, the story was published. The headline was shocking. "Woman lives in hiding for 20 years after taking blame for fraud she didn't commit." Below, an old photo of Margaret next to a recent one, taken with her permission. The story was detailed, well-written, compassionate. Michael had done an excellent job. He told Margaret's story without turning her into a victim or a hero, just presenting the facts. He mentioned the names of the men involved, all documented. He presented the evidence. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The farm phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanting interviews. Curious people, some offering support, others throwing accusations. Thomas had to take the phone off the hook eventually. In town, the chaos was even greater. The newspaper sold out all editions before noon. Groups formed in the streets, arguing heatedly. Some people defended Margaret, others accused her of being a liar. The men named in the story locked themselves in their homes, refusing to comment. David Thompson, Thomas's father-in-law and Jennifer's father, was one of the first to speak out publicly. He gave an interview on the local radio, denying everything. "These accusations are absurd," he said, his voice trembling with anger or nervousness. Hard to tell. "That woman is making up stories to get out of her own guilt. The documents must be fake." Jennifer heard the interview on the kitchen radio and felt her heart tighten. She looked at Thomas. "My father is lying in front of everyone." "I know," Thomas said gently. "He's scared. All of them are. That doesn't justify it." "No, it doesn't." Jennifer grabbed the truck keys. "I need to go there. I need to talk to him." "Do you want me to come with you?" "No. This is something I need to do alone." Thomas kissed her forehead. "Be careful." Jennifer drove to her childhood home, where her father had lived alone since her mother passed away years ago. The house had all its curtains closed. She knocked on the door insistently until David finally opened. "What do you want?" he asked sharply. "To talk, as father and daughter." "I have nothing to say to you. You chose their side." "I chose the side of truth," Jennifer replied, pushing the door and entering. "And you're going to listen to me." David tried to protest, but Jennifer was already in the living room staring at him. "Why did you lie, Dad? Why do you keep lying when you know the truth is out there, documented? You don't understand how things work. It wasn't just about money, it was about reputation, about position in the community." "It was about pride," Jennifer corrected. "You sacrificed an innocent woman to protect your own pride." David collapsed into an armchair, suddenly looking much older. "She wasn't innocent. She accepted the deal. No one forced her. She accepted because she was protecting her son, a boy who would have been destroyed if the truth had come out back then. You took advantage of her motherly love." "And what do you want me to do now? Get on my knees and ask for forgiveness? Destroy everything I've built?" "I want you to own up to what you did. Be man enough to admit the mistake." David remained silent for a long moment. Jennifer could see the internal struggle reflected on his face. "If I do this, I'll lose everything," he finally said, his voice small. "The respect of the community, the business, everything." "You've already lost something more important," Jennifer said, tears in her eyes. "You lost your daughter." "Jennifer, no, Dad. You can't fix this with words now. If you want me back in your life, you'll have to earn it. And it starts with the truth." She left without looking back, leaving her father sitting alone in the dark living room. When she returned to the farm, she was emotionally exhausted. Thomas greeted her with a tight hug. "How did it go?" "Hard. He's terrified, but I think I planted a seed." In the following days, the story gained even more momentum. Reporters from bigger cities started showing up. A regional television program wanted to do a special feature. Thomas, Jennifer, Emily, and Margaret gathered to decide how to proceed. "I think we should give an interview," Emily suggested. "Control the narrative, otherwise others will do it for us." "I agree," Jennifer said, "but it has to be with someone we trust, someone who will tell the story right." They chose a journalist known for her serious and respectful work. The interview was scheduled to be recorded at the farm on a Saturday. When the day arrived, everyone was nervous. The film crew set up equipment in the main room. The journalist, an elegant woman in her 50s named Barbara Collins, spoke with each of them before starting, putting them at ease. "Remember," she said, "this is about telling your truth. Don't worry about anything else." The recording began. Barbara asked careful questions, giving each person space to speak. Margaret told her story with a choked but firm voice. Thomas talked about growing up without a mother, about the pain and confusion. Emily described discovering she had a family she never knew existed. Jennifer explained the difficult position of being in the middle, between her biological family and the family she chose. The most powerful part came when Barbara asked Margaret, "If you could go back in time, would you do things differently?" Margaret thought for a long time before answering. "I don't know. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting my children from scandal, from shame. But I see now that I caused another pain, different but equally deep. So maybe yes, I would do things differently, or maybe not. We'll never know what would have happened if I had chosen another path. I can only work with the now, and now I'm trying to fix what I broke." "And you, Thomas?" Barbara turned to him. "Do you forgive your mother?" Thomas looked at Margaret before answering. "I'm learning to forgive. It doesn't happen overnight. But I'm trying. Because holding on to anger only hurts myself. She has already suffered enough. We've all suffered enough." The interview aired the following week and had a major impact. Public opinion began to clearly turn in Margaret's favor. People who initially doubted now showed support. Campaigns emerged on social media demanding justice. The men named in the original article began to feel real pressure. Their businesses were affected. Customers started pulling away. The community, once willing to forget, now demanded answers. That's when something unexpected happened. Mrs. Eleanor, an 82-year-old woman known to everyone as the most respected matriarch in town, asked to speak publicly. She scheduled a meeting in the town's central square on the Sunday after Mass. Hundreds of people showed up. Thomas, Jennifer, Emily, and Margaret also attended, curious about what the lady had to say. Mrs. Eleanor climbed the church steps, leaning on her cane, and looked at the gathered crowd. Her voice, despite her age, was clear and firm. "I'm here today because I can no longer remain silent," she began. "Many of you have known me for decades. You know I'm not one for rumors or gossip, but today I need to speak the truth I've kept for 20 years. The crowd fell completely silent. I was there. The day Margaret Miller was accused, I saw the men's meetings deciding what to do. I heard when they planned to pin the blame on her, and I stayed silent. To my eternal shame, I stayed silent." A murmur ran through the crowd. Thomas felt Jennifer squeeze his hand. "Those men," Mrs. Eleanor continued, pointing to where David Thompson and some others stood in the crowd, "weren't protecting their families. They were protecting themselves, their bank accounts, their reputations, and they sacrificed an innocent woman for it." "That's a lie," David shouted. "You're senile, you don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Mrs. Eleanor retorted, her voice rising. "And I have proof." Silence returned, even heavier than before. "I kept letters, conversations that my late husband, who was also involved, had with you. He felt guilty before he passed, told me everything, and I kept it, waiting for the right moment. That moment is now." Mrs. Eleanor motioned to a granddaughter, who came running with a box. From inside, the lady pulled out envelopes, papers, even some photographs. "It's all here. Anyone who wants to see can come here afterward. But today, in front of everyone, I want to say Margaret Miller is innocent, and we as a community owe her an apology." The crowd erupted in conversation. Some people started applauding. Others shouted indignantly at the named men. David Thompson tried to leave, but people surrounded him, demanding he stay and listen. Thomas looked at his mother. Margaret had tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of relief. Finally, after 2 decades, someone besides her family had publicly confirmed her innocence. Emily hugged her mother. Jennifer joined them too. Thomas wrapped his arms around all three, protecting his family from the surrounding chaos. "It's over," he whispered. "It's finally over." But it wasn't completely over. There were still consequences to face. In the following days, lawsuits began to be filed. Families who had lost money 2 decades earlier took legal action against the men involved. David Thompson and the others tried to hire lawyers, but the evidence was overwhelming. Jennifer received several calls from her father, all of which she ignored, until one morning he showed up at the farm in person. Thomas saw him first, standing at the entrance, looking lost. He went to him. "What do you want?" "To talk to my daughter," David said, his voice tired. "Please." Thomas hesitated, but ended up calling Jennifer. She came, her arms crossed defensively. "Hi, Dad." "Jennifer, David began, but the words failed him. He tried again. "You were right. About everything." Jennifer waited, not making it easy for him. "I was a coward. 20 years ago and now. I put my interests above what was right, and I lost. I lost the only thing that really matters, you. And now you want me to just forgive and forget? No, I don't expect that, but I want to try to make things right. I will publicly admit my part in what happened. I will pay what I owe. I will do whatever it takes." Jennifer looked at her father, seeing a broken man finally facing the consequences of his actions. "It will take time," she said finally, "rebuilding trust. But if you're truly willing to do what's right, then maybe, with time, we can have some kind of relationship again." David nodded, tears in his eyes. "It's more than I deserve. Thank you." He looked past Jennifer and saw Margaret watching from a distance. He hesitated, then walked over to her. "Margaret, I have no words to describe how sorry I am. What we did to you was unforgivable." Margaret studied him for a long moment. "You're right. It was unforgivable. But 20 years taught me that holding grudges only poisons the soul. I don't forgive you today, but maybe one day I will." David nodded, accepting that. He said goodbye and left, his shoulders hunched under the weight of guilt. The following weeks brought more changes. Some of the men involved ended up being ordered to pay restitution. Others lost businesses, reputations. The town was divided, but gradually the truth was prevailing. As for the Miller family, they were learning to be exactly that, a family. Margaret moved permanently to the farm, occupying the guest room. She helped where she could, especially with the vegetable garden she had significantly expanded. Her medicinal herbs became well known in the region. Emily started visiting almost every day. Conversations with Margaret became easier, more natural. They discovered shared tastes, similar mannerisms, connections that went beyond blood. One afternoon, Emily brought Susan, the aunt who raised her, to meet Margaret. It was an emotional meeting for everyone. "Thank you," Margaret said to Susan, holding the other woman's hands, "for loving my daughter when I couldn't, for being the mother she deserved." Susan wiped tears from her eyes. "She was always my daughter. Nothing changes that. But I'm glad she has you now too. Every child deserves to know their roots." Thomas watched the three women talking and felt peace, a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. Jennifer joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "It seems like everything will be okay," she commented. "I think so," he agreed. But there was still one last piece to be resolved: the cabin in the woods. One morning, Thomas had an idea. He called Emily and Jennifer to talk. "What would you think about turning that cabin into something useful?" he proposed. "How so?" Emily asked. "A place to welcome women in difficult situations, like what my mother went through. A refuge where they can stay temporarily, think, recover, without judgment, without pressure." Jennifer smiled, understanding the vision. "Like a retreat, a safe space." "Exactly. Mother survived there for 20 years. It proved the place has potential. With some improvements, it could help many people." Emily clapped her hands. "I love that idea. I could even use my veterinary knowledge to create animal therapy. It's proven to help with trauma." When they presented the idea to Margaret, she was moved. "Turn my exile into something positive? Into a place of healing?" "Exactly," Thomas said. "Give purpose to the suffering. Make it worthwhile." Margaret agreed immediately. They started making plans. Thomas would use part of the proceeds from selling a section of the farm to fund the renovations. Jennifer would be responsible for the administrative part. Emily would create the assisted therapy programs. Margaret would be the coordinator, using all the wisdom accumulated during her years of isolation. The news spread quickly. To everyone's surprise, they started receiving donations, construction materials, furniture, even money. The community, feeling collective guilt for what happened to Margaret, wanted to help. One of the biggest donors was David Thompson. He showed up one morning with a substantial check. "For the project," he said simply. "It's the least I can do." Construction began. The cabin was carefully renovated, keeping its rustic character but adding comfort and safety. 2 additional smaller cabins were built to accommodate more people. A barn became a community space with a large kitchen and living area. The vegetable garden was expanded. Emily brought some animals, gentle goats, chickens, even 2 older, calm horses. She explained that caring for animals helped people reconnect with compassion and responsibility. Jennifer created a simple but functional structure. Women could stay for up to 3 months, free of charge. No one would be judged or pressured to tell their story. They would simply be welcomed, fed, protected. Margaret prepared to receive the first guests with nervousness and anticipation. She knew what it was like to be desperate, alone, with no options. She wanted to give others what she never had: a safe space with people who understood. The official opening took place on a Saturday afternoon, 6 months after Thomas and Jennifer found Margaret for the first time. The whole town was invited. The turnout was large. Mrs. Eleanor was there, proud. David Thompson and some other men involved in the original scandal attended, looking uncomfortable, but trying to make amends. Susan and her husband were there, supporting Emily. Even Michael, the journalist who published the original story, showed up to cover the opening. Thomas gave a short speech. "This place represents transformation. It represents taking pain and turning it into healing, taking isolation and turning it into community. My mother suffered here alone for 20 years. Now this place will help ensure no woman has to suffer alone again." Margaret also spoke. her voice stronger than it had been in decades. For a long time, I thought my story was about loss. I lost years with my children. I lost my place in society. I lost a lot. But I realized my story is about love. A mother's love that made me sacrifice. The love of my children that gave me a second chance. The love of a community that is here today. This refuge is built on that love. And I hope every woman who comes through here feels that. After the speeches, people circulated through the refuge, admiring the facilities. There was music, food, celebration. But the most striking moment came when a young woman, perhaps about 25, timidly approached Margaret. "Mrs. Margaret," she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, dear. I need help. My husband hurts me. I have nowhere to go. I heard about this place and—" Margaret gently held the young woman's hands. "You are safe now. Come with me, let's talk." Thomas watched his mother guide the young woman inside one of the cabins, and he knew they had done the right thing. The refuge wasn't just a symbol, it was a real necessity. In the following weeks, other women began to arrive. Some stayed a few days, others weeks. Each had her own story, her own trauma, her own journey. Margaret welcomed them all with a patience and compassion that only someone who had suffered could have. Emily implemented her animal-assisted therapy programs. You could see women who arrived closed off, distrustful, gradually opening up as they cared for the goats, fed the chickens, and brushed the horses. There was something about caring for other vulnerable creatures that helped heal their own wounds. Jennifer managed everything efficiently, making sure there were always supplies, that the bills were paid, that everything ran smoothly. But she was also there emotionally, listening when needed, offering hugs, being a steady presence. Thomas supported in every way he could. He made repairs when needed, provided firewood, helped in the garden. But mostly he was proud of his mother, his sister, his wife, of all of them. 6 months after the refuge's opening, Jennifer made an announcement during dinner. "I have some news," she said, barely containing a smile. Thomas looked at her, waiting. "I'm pregnant." Silence for a moment, then an explosion of joy. Margaret started to cry. Emily jumped up to hug Jennifer. Thomas was speechless, just pulling his wife into a tight hug. "A baby," Margaret whispered, amazed. "A grandchild. A new generation." "Our family is growing," Emily said, smiling broadly. That night, the 4 of them sat on the porch of the main house, looking at the stars. The refuge in the distance was lit up, with a few women chatting outside their cabins. "Who would have thought?" Thomas commented. "A year ago, I didn't know you were alive. Emily didn't know she was my sister, and now we have all this." "Life takes strange turns," Margaret said. "I spent 20 years in hiding, thinking I was protecting you all. But maybe in some twisted way, everything had to happen exactly like this, for us to get here, to this moment." "I don't know if I believe in fate," Emily said, "but I believe we can always choose what to do with the cards we're dealt, and you chose well. We chose well." Jennifer placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "This baby will grow up knowing its grandmother. It'll have an aunt present. It'll have a real family. That's all that matters." Thomas looked at the 3 most important women in his life and felt deep gratitude. Yes, there had been pain. Yes, there had been loss. But there had also been reunion. There had been healing. There had been love. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "Why?" Jennifer asked. "For giving me a second chance. For giving us second chances. For proving it's never too late to start over." Margaret stood up and kissed her son's forehead. "I'm the one who's thankful. For looking for me. For not giving up on me. For giving me more than I ever deserved." "We all deserve love," Emily said. "We all deserve forgiveness. We all deserve family." They stayed there for hours, talking, laughing, sometimes crying, but always together. A patched-up, imperfect, but real family. The following months brought more changes. David Thompson started visiting regularly, trying to rebuild his relationship with Jennifer. It was a slow process, with setbacks, but there was progress. He even offered to build a playground at the refuge for when the women brought their children. The refuge gained regional reputation. Women came from neighboring towns. Some stayed, others returned to their lives strengthened. Stories of transformation began to circulate. One woman who arrived with severe depression left months later to open a small business. Another who was fleeing an abusive relationship found the courage to report it and start over. Margaret flourished in this role. Decades of solitude had taught her self-confidence, resilience. Now she shared these lessons. She became not just a coordinator, but a mentor, counselor, mother figure to many who had no one else. When Jennifer's belly began to show visibly, Margaret grew even more excited. She spent hours knitting baby clothes, preparing the nursery, reading about newborn care. "Mom, you've done all this twice before," Thomas joked. "But I missed so much," she replied. "I missed your first words, first steps, all the little joys. I won't miss them with my grandson." The baby was born on a spring morning, a healthy boy who cried loudly at birth, announcing his arrival to the world. Thomas cried too, holding his son for the first time. "Welcome, little one," he whispered. Jennifer, exhausted but radiant, smiled. "What are we going to name him?" Thomas looked at his mother, who was waiting anxiously at the hospital room door, along with Emily. "Robert. Robert Margaret Miller." Margaret covered her face with her hands, emotional. "You don't have to, after everything." "Yes, I do. Robert was complicated, made mistakes. But he also gave me life, raised me the best he could. And Margaret taught me about sacrifice, about love, about second chances. Our son will carry both names. He'll represent that we're all complicated, but we all deserve to be remembered for the good parts too." Emily joined them, looking at her nephew with adoration. "He's perfect. He's hope," Jennifer said. "Hope that no matter how messy our story is, we can always write a new chapter." The news of the birth spread quickly. The shelter organized a small welcome party. The women staying there temporarily prepared food and decorations. They wanted to celebrate the new life, a symbol of fresh starts. When Thomas brought Jennifer and the baby back home, they were greeted with applause and tears of joy. Margaret held her grandchild for the first time, and something inside her, something that had been broken for 20 years, finally healed completely. "Hello, Robert," she whispered to the baby. "Your grandmother has so many stories to tell you, stories about mistakes and redemption, about losing your way and finding yourself, but mostly about love. Always about love." The baby opened his eyes, focusing on his grandmother's face, and Margaret swore he smiled. That night, after everyone had left, the family gathered in the living room. The baby slept peacefully in Jennifer's arms. Emily was curled up on the couch, exhausted but happy. Thomas watched everything with a full heart. Margaret was knitting another little blanket, already planning the next gift. "I think we made it," Thomas said suddenly. "Made what?" Emily asked. "Become a real family, in spite of everything, because of everything." Jennifer agreed, and it will only get better, as Robert grows up. As we spend more time together, as we create more memories. Margaret stopped knitting and looked at all of them. "You know what I realized? I spent 20 years in hiding, thinking I was protecting you by staying away. But what you really needed was for me to stay, to fight, to choose family above all else. It took me 2 decades to learn that lesson. I hope you never have to learn it the hard way like I did." "We won't," Thomas promised, "because you taught us. Through your mistake, through your pain, you taught us what truly matters." Emily got up and went to Margaret, hugging her. "You are the strongest mother I know. You survived the impossible, and you turned trauma into purpose. That is extraordinary." "I'm just a woman who did the best she could," Margaret replied humbly. "We're all just doing our best," Jennifer said. "And sometimes our best is enough." Thomas joined the hug, wrapping his arms around all the important women in his life. The baby, sensing the movement, woke up and looked around with curious eyes, already a part of this patched-up but real family. Outside, the shelter glowed in the distance, lights in the cabin windows where wounded women found healing. The cabin where it all began was now a center of hope and renewal. The Pine Ridge farm had seen generations, It had seen joy and sorrow. It had seen secrets and revelations. But now, for the first time in decades, it saw something that had been missing for a long time, a complete, imperfect but together family. And as the stars shone in the Virginia sky, that family knew that, no matter what the future brought, they would face it together. Because they had learned, in the hardest way possible, that family isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about forgiveness. It's about love that endures even when everything tells you to give up. The story of Margaret, Thomas, Emily, and Jennifer wasn't about a perfect, happy ending. It was about real, messy, honest endings. It was about making peace with the past while building a better future. It was about transforming the hidden cabin in the woods from a symbol of isolation into a symbol of community. And as baby Robert slept in his mother's arms, surrounded by generations of complicated but true love, the Miller family knew that finally, after 20 long years, they were exactly where they needed to be. Home. Together. Complete. End of story. And so, what did you think of this story of new beginnings and forgiveness? Did Thomas do the right thing by exposing the truth after so many years? Did Margaret deserve a second chance with her children? Share your honest opinion in the comments. We really want to know what you think. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one. Your companionship means everything to us.